Hello, I am Joshua P. Warren, and this is Joshua P. Warren Daily. And in this time of such great upheaval and unrest and transition and transformation, I am sure that you are hearing lots of conspiracy theories. Some of them probably true, some of them definitely false, but everybody is trying to come up with an explanation for why things are happening the way they are happening, because we know that there cannot be an effect without a cause. And you know what's funny? When the powers that be appear to try to divide and conquer us, there are all kinds of biases that are brought out. But you know, at the end of the day, there really ultimately are just two classes: the rich and the poor. And I think the super rich will do whatever they can to try to make the poor folks forget that. Okay, by seeding a lot of distractions out there. And you know, when we talk about wealth, sometimes you can't comprehend the amount of wealth that some people have. You know, here in Las Vegas, there's a casino called Binion's that you can go to, and they have $1 million on public display. It's all $100 bills. It's a giant pyramid. You can go there and they'll take your picture with it. And the funny thing is, once you see how much physical space that $1 million worth of $100 bills takes up, you always scoff when you watch a movie and the bad guy wants $1 million and they show up with a little, suitcase or whatever that supposedly has the $1 million in it, because you know that it's a lot more than that. And then when you start talking about hundreds of millions, billions, trillions, I mean, you can't comprehend the amount of wealth. And I remember when I went to London and visited the Tower of London, you could go see the crown jewels. And I found it humorous that when you go into this building that's pretty much a gigantic safe that has all of these, ridiculous, again, like priceless things, just giant things made of gold and diamonds and gems, and you get on sort of a moving sidewalk. And so that keeps the crowd moving. And as you go down this moving sidewalk, you're in the room where all these things are sort of spotlit, and you get to see more material wealth than you'll probably ever get to see in person in your whole life. Okay, over 10 minutes or whatever, you're just looking at all this stuff. And then at the end of it, there was a donation box. Okay, I kid you not. There was a donation box. And who knows, I don't even recall what they were trying to convince you to raise money for or what, but is that the definition of irony? I don't know. Or is that just a clue as to how people get that damn rich? Right? They just can't ever get enough. They can't ever get enough. I don't know. But here's something that's really interesting for you to consider. Most experts say that the first multinational corporation was the Knights Templar. Because the richest people who have ever lived have been kings and queens and religious leaders. And there was a period in history where they all kind of combined into this absolutely just dominating system of treasure and wealth and power that was managed by the Knights Templar, because these are guys who Well, they were professional fighters. They could protect things. They would kill you. And yet they themselves supposedly took these vows, like vows of poverty or whatever, saying like, oh, you can trust us. We have no interest in taking your wealth, but we will protect it for you. And there are a lot of mysteries surrounding the Knights Templar. We're obviously, that's why I'm bringing this up. We're going to talk about some of those mysteries. But it makes you think, there is this sense out there that one of the reasons that they were so willing to protect the wealth of people was because that they were given the opportunity to also possess some sacred objects in Christianity that transcend, that go even further than anything money could provide. And when I say Christianity, I say that because the Knights Templar were a Christian order. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But I'm really just talking about, the Judeo-Christian, going back to the Abrahamic traditions, because we're talking about things from the Old Testament like the Ark of the Covenant, right? So, that said, it's really fascinating to sort of scratch your head and think about what happened to all the wealth that was being managed. And right now, you have to consider there are people all over the world who are losing unbelievable amounts of money, right? And the funny thing is, because you have all these businesses that are closed down, you have businesses being destroyed, you have curfews in place. But the thing is, money does not just go poof and vanish. It doesn't just disappear. It doesn't just evaporate. It changes hands. Okay, it goes from one place to another. So when a lot of people are losing money, then that means a lot of other people are making money. It goes from one place to another. And so therefore, what's happening right now is some kind of a mass transition of wealth flowing from one sector to another sector. And how long has this been going on? What kind of a strategy is this? Who's behind it? Who ultimately is coordinating it? I bet you that if you knew the names of the people who are behind a lot of this stuff, well, let me put it this way. I think if you had their names, you would say, I've never heard of this person, and never heard of that person, never heard of this person. I think the richest people out there, the most powerful people who are out there, are people who sort of operate in the shadows. They don't want fame, publicity. They don't want the spotlight. They don't want the all-seeing eye drawn down on them. They operate quietly. I'm going to tell you at the end of this podcast where I think you can start looking if you want to understand a little bit more about where they may be, some of these people. But this past week, I have been selling the true golden ratio antenna pendant. That is over now. I only took orders for 7 days. And so those of you who bought one of those will be receiving it shortly. I'm having them manufactured as we speak. But if you bought one of those, and you can't get it anymore, so please don't contact me and ask if you can. That was I made it very clear that was only available for 7 days. If you bought one of those, then as a free bonus, I included for you, courtesy of Mr. Timothy Green Beckley, a fascinating book called Hidden Treasures of the Knights Templar, Secrets of Rennes-le-Château, Roslyn Chapel, Oak Island, and the Masonic Order. Now, of course, Timothy Green Beckley, he publishes truly the most outstanding, remarkable, in-depth books about the widest spectrum of amazing topics you can imagine. And this particular book, Hidden Treasures of the Knights Templar, I have it in front of me right now. It's got a really cool cover. The cover looks like a treasure map. And then in the middle of it is a treasure chest. And it has the Templar cross, the cross patay on the front. And this contains work by Timothy Green Beckley, Sean Castile, Brian J. Allen, Renee Barnett, Hercules Invictus, Ambrose Noble. It's 290 pages. And this is a big book, 290 pages. You can really go down a rabbit hole or a wormhole, depending on what you're inclined to be researching when you start digging into this book. So I'm very grateful to Timothy Green Beckley, Mr. UFO, for allowing me to give that as a free bonus to those of you who got the True Golden Ratio Antenna Pendant. And he also gave me permission to read some of it to you, and so I'm about to do that. First off, however, I would like to just go to the almighty Wikipedia and just tell you how Wikipedia describes the Knights Templar. The poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, also also known as the Order of Solomon's Temple, the Knights Templar, or simply the Templars, were a Catholic military order founded in 1119, headquartered on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem through 1128, when they went to the Vatican and were recognized in 1139 by the papal bull Omne Datum Optimum. By the way, a papal bull, that's just sort of a public declaration that the Pope makes. Kind of like an executive order coming from the president, I guess. It says, anyway, the order was active until 1312, when it was perpetually suppressed by Pope Clement V by the bull Vox in Excelso. Goes on to say the Templars became a favored charity throughout Christendom and grew rapidly in membership and power. They were prominent in Christian finance. Templar Knights, in their distinctive white mantles with a red cross, were among the most skilled fighting units of the Crusades. Non-combatant members of the order, who made up as much as 90% of their members, managed a large economic infrastructure throughout Christendom, developing an innovative financial technique, actually, that's plural, innovative financial techniques that were an early form of banking, building its own network of nearly 1,000 commanderies and fortifications across Europe and the Holy Land, and arguably forming the world's first multinational corporation. Let me pause here by saying, Jim Marrs has written some great stuff about this topic. I believe one of his books, Rule by Secrecy, in particular, lays out for you the foundation of what is now modern day banking. And the gist of it is, obviously, one part of understanding wealth is realizing that we used to have a barter system where people just traded what they physically needed or wanted. So, if I have a cow and you need a cow, and you have got a fresh water supply and I need that fresh water, well, we can trade here. That's sort of how it worked out. But then the Chinese, they started what is called fiat currency, which was basically where they would take a piece of paper and the emperor would say, this piece of paper is going to be worth a cow because I say it is. And that changed everything when this concept was introduced of creating currency that doesn't have to have any physical intrinsic value. which is basically how we live now. Most of the financial transactions that happen in the world every day are a form of fiat. Except instead of being pieces of paper, now we're dealing with digits stored in a computer somewhere. It's the same thing though, right? And that's one part of it that you have to understand. The other part is that when people would travel, they didn't want to carry all of their wealth with them because they would get robbed. We've all heard of highway robbery. Well, what do you think that means? That used to mean a lot back in the day when you were traveling. There were highwaymen. There were robbers that they knew they would fight over that perfect little bend in the trail where you would not see them coming and they'd pop right out and they'd have you there by the short hairs and they'd take your stuff. And so people realize, like, look, the best way for me to prevent being robbed is to not have all my stuff with me. And so that's why that the Knights Templar said, well, hey, we're going to set up these commanderies, these posts, where we can guard a portion of your fortune for you and give you a piece of paper, which is like your bank statement, saying how much of our stuff, how much of your stuff we have in our commandery. It was just like a bank. So that way, if the robbers were like, well, it doesn't do any good to rob the individual, there's only so much I'm going to get, you're going to have to go try to fight the Knights Templar and get that treasure, right? And so people could stop in at these commanderies and get just enough wealth to get to the next stop. And again, that's how we function today. We go from ATM to ATM, from bank to bank. It's the same thing. So this system was so logical and so effective that everybody gave them their wealth. And so they became the ones who were in physical possession of the wealthy, whatever was valued, the wealthy stuff. They had the physical control over it. And supposedly they got carried away. You just heard me read here that over 90% of the people involved eventually were not even knights, really, or at least they're not combatant knights. Who wouldn't want to have a desk in the Knights Templar complex, right? So this was very successful for hundreds of years, but it was inevitable that somebody was going to come in and destroy it. So continuing with the Wikipedia article, it says, the Templars were closely tied to the Crusades. When the Holy Land was lost, support for the order faded. Rumors about the Templars' secret initiation ceremony created distrust. And King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt to the order, took advantage of this distrust to destroy them and erase his debt. In 1307, he had many of the order's members in France arrested, tortured into giving false confessions, and burned at the stake. Pope Clement V disbanded the order in 1312 under pressure from King Philip. The abrupt reduction in power of a significant group in European society gave rise to speculation, legend, and legacy through the ages. And as you may or may not know, when the day came, the other shoe dropped, the hammer came down, however you want to put it, and they rounded up at once all these Templars that would become tortured and in many cases executed, as they said, burned at the stake. That happened on Friday the 13th of October, the year 1307. And so many people believe that the superstitions regarding Friday the 13th started with the roundup of the Templars on Friday the 13th of October, 1307. So you got a couple of 13s in there also. But this is a big, big story. Okay, and there are lots of complicated and complex facets, a lot to dig into. And Timothy Green Beckley et al. Have done their best to break some of this down for you in this book called Hidden Treasures of the Knights Templar. And even if you did not get a free copy of this ebook when you purchased the Golden Ratio Antenna Pendant, well, the book still exists, okay? You can still go to Amazon. You can buy this book for $21.95 brand new. You can get it used for $15.92. And I suppose you can get it as a Kindle as well. Anyway, look, I'm going to read some of this to you. And again, this is courtesy of Timothy Green Beckley. So, as a matter of fact, why don't we just start by reading his introduction. Everyone is fascinated with tales of lost treasure. Millions make that billions, and lost loot has been hidden or just plain forgotten about all over the world. There are sunken ships, Wells Fargo trucks that arrived at their destination empty, the loot from train and bank robberies stolen by the likes of Jesse James and other outlaws of the Old West, right up to the gangsters of the Roaring Twenties and the Depression-era public enemies of the 1930s. Always did favor Bonnie and Clyde over Dillinger. They seemed like a match made in heaven. Or was that hell? But these treasure troves are no match for the uncalculated zillions hidden away by the almighty Knights Templar. We can't even guess the amount we are talking about here because their hoard was not in the form of cash or even jewelry, but in priceless, and I do mean utterly priceless, relics from the Holy Land. We have, for example, the Ark of the Covenant that housed the Ten Commandments. I mean, what in God's name could something like that be worth? No one would even dare put a price on something this vastly significant to Christians and Jews worldwide. And then there is the Holy Grail, from which Jesus drank at the Last Supper. Even if it were not made of solid gold, anyone possessing this artifact would be worshipped like a king. The trail of the Templars is a long and winding one, but all roads lead to Oak Island, off the coast of Newfoundland. Here the Templars, who were great seafarers, might have carried their loot across the Atlantic and buried it at the bottom of a money pit on Oak Island. Here we will follow the trail of the Templars from their European strongholds, such as Scotland's Roslin Chapel and France's Rennes-le-Château, to the final resting place of all that is sacred and valuable, Oak Island. So journey with us. Learn of the secrets of the various spiritual retreats of the Templars until we reach the final resting place of their vast treasure together. Blessings and triumphs to all. Timothy G. Beckley, Inner Light Global Communications. So, man, there's so much to choose from in this book. I tell you what, here's what I'm going to read for you. And even though there are all of these great authors who contributed to this book, let me read this part, also written by Timothy Green Beckley, and it's I think this is very fitting. It's called simply enough, What Became of the Wealth of the Templars? Without a doubt, the hidden treasures of the Knights Templars cannot be estimated in terms that are realistic or that we could readily understand in any rational way. Today we speak in terms of the Rockefeller dynasty, the Rothschild banking family, Goldman Sachs, the Clinton Foundation. But even if you merged all the vast wealth of these and many more conglomerates, you would get nowhere near the vast fortune of the Templars. Not only are we talking about tons of gold and silver and kingly jewels, but unimaginable treasures, such as the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, and some even say an array of unpublished Shakespeare sonnets, i.e., actual writer Francis Bacon or perhaps Marlowe. The Templars also organized the first banking system, and many of their depositors were fabulously wealthy beyond one's wildest dreams. They put their monetary weight behind kings, queens, and assorted nobility. According to Michelle Walling, writing in the blog How to Exit the Matrix, a contingent of Templars tunneled under the Temple Mount for a most ambitious purpose. Quote, in 1867, a clue came to light when a British archaeological team excavated under the site of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. There they uncovered tunnels extending vertically from a mosque for some 25 meters, which fanned out horizontally under the dome of King Solomon's temple. Templars, spurs, and various pieces of armaments were found as proof that the tunnels had been used by them. A prevailing theory is that the Knights Templars were digging under the temple for the treasure left there by the Jews after the invasions of the Romans in 70 AD. Other theories suggest the Knights were guarding the Holy Grail and in possession of major treasures. The biblical Temple of Solomon once housed the Ark of the Covenant and 10 Commandments. There are early Masonic writings in the 1800s citing documents which allegedly link the Templars with the Ark of the Covenant and treasure buried in the Temple of Solomon. Regardless of which theory is the right one, when they emerged again in Europe, they were more wealthy, powerful, and influential than ever. End quote. This wealth was hidden, buried, sunk, perhaps in some cases even left in more or less plain sight. And where might this vast treasure be buried? Or perhaps a more appropriate term would be concealed, away from the hands of mortal man. Oh, but such an answer is not as simple as it might seem. The treasure could be spread throughout Europe and the New World, but major portions of it might well be within easy reach, though that is a rather laughable position to take when you consider all those who have sought the Templars' vast fortune over the centuries and come up empty-handed. According to those who have spent decades trying to trace the trail of the treasure, the Knights were great seafarers, and indications are that they made it up as far north as Newfoundland. Cutting to the chase, following the loss of the Holy Land to the Ottoman Empire, the Knights found themselves faced with charges of great heresy from as high up in the church as one can go, the Pope himself. Not to mention the King of France, who in the early 1300s arrested any knight he could get his hands on and had them unceremoniously burned at the stake. Fleeing for their lives, a group of the remaining knights escaped to Scotland, where they met up with nobleman Henry St. Clair. Some of the treasure might have been buried beneath Rosslyn Chapel for a spell and removed later when the vast trove was taken to a modest village that is now world famous, Rennes-le-Château. A portion of the gold and jewelry may have been recovered by the parish priest, who left us even more clues in homage to the Templars. From Scotland and France, the Templars spread out to the New World, thanks to Henry St. Clair, who is believed to have explored Greenland and North America a century before Columbus found himself traveling along his own watery route to the New World. The Templars, according to popular theory, constructed a maze of underground chambers and tunnels beneath Oak Island, where the majority of the Knights' wealth was hidden in the hopes that a future generation of Templars would return and secure the Holy Grail and other biblical memorabilia whose value cannot be even calculated in today's financial market. It is said that once the fever strikes, there is nothing that can pull you away from Rennes-le-Château, Roslyn Chapel, or the ultra-mysterious Oak Island. Joe Atherton lives in Bedfordshire, England, but has visited Oak Island 4 times over the years. She has done much to bring together, in essence, to marry Rennes-le-Château to Oak Island, and prove that this is a legitimate home of the knight's treasure, although final proof has been elusive. A true historian, Joe Atherton has investigated the restoration of the church and Rennes-le-Château, and, to anyone's way of thinking, made an amazing discovery. She sketches in the framework of a true mystery with many unexplainable elements, nevertheless still helping us to understand through her many revelations. Quote, "The mystery grew from when the priest, Berenger Saunier, found 3 wooden tubes sealed tight with wax. He opened them and found inside a number of parchments. A short while later, while repairing a large flagstone in front of the altar, the workman found a clay pot packed full of ancient gold coins, a very fine Visigothic necklace and a bracelet, and a 13th century gold chalice. An ancient carving was revealed on the underside of the flagstone. Experts have since confirmed the stone dates to the Visigothic or Carolingian period. It has 2 carved panels, one of which is very worn. The panel on the left shows a man bearing a sword drawn about to mount a horse, while the right panel appears to show a man with the sword drawn on horseback with possibly a child on the horse with him. In addition to these finds, a number of skeletons were discovered interred under the stone, and one skull in particular showed signs that it had a ritualistic hole drilled into it. After a certain amount of restoration had taken place, whilst descending from the bells, a bell ringer noticed something glinting in the wooden pillar at the foot of the stairs. On closer inspection, it emerged to be a small glass phial, inside which was a tightly rolled scrap of paper. He quickly took his find to Saunier, who almost immediately began excavations within the church. Holes were dug in the aisle, nave, and transept. By the year 1893, Saunier was obviously unable to have deciphered the parchments and decided that help was needed. His bishop in Carcassonne at that time was Felix Arsène Billiard, who suggested that he take them to Paris, where he knew of some priests who were well versed in such matters. To Saunier's surprise, the bishop even paid his fare. Having handed over the documents, he returned on the appointed day to hear the verdict on his discovery. It appears that whatever was discovered, the priest's superiors were not willing to part with all the information they had uncovered. Although we have no evidence of what transpired between the 2 men, it is obvious that Saunier managed to extract something from Belle, because no sooner had he returned home than he apparently became rich beyond quantifiable measure. Saunier had changed from a poor priest to a millionaire. He incredibly made the following purchases. The complete restoration of the church began, including help from the most skilled craftsmen in the region to create statues and carve intricate stonework. Saunier had a luxurious villa built with spectacular landscape, tropical gardens. He built a Gothic tower in which he housed his impressive library. Books were purchased from far and wide, and he even appointed a professional bookbinder to work for him full-time. He bought a collection of 1,000 postcards and another of 100,000 stamps. Saunier filled his garden with exotic animals. He imported wines and spirits from all over the world and entertained lavishly. To the poorest families in the region, he gave sums of between 10,000 F and 15,000 F, an absolute fortune in those days, considering the estimate of just 4,500 F for the construction of an entirely new church. It is estimated that from the moment he came into his fortune to the end of his life, he spent somewhere in the realm of 15 to 24 million gold francs of the day. But then again, if he had access to the knight's treasure, it would have been all the money, well, almost, on earth, notes J, for the Templar hoard included all the treasure they obtained from their expedition to Greece, including a huge ransom paid by the Athenians. There was the entire wealth of the city of Rome. There was a large portion of the treasure of Jerusalem. But we cannot by any means declare that this is the final end to the historical account of the knight's treasure, for assuredly it is not. It must have been quite a task, requiring numerous seaworthy vessels to transport the treasure from France to Newfoundland, first by land and then by sea. But apparently they did, because most theorists believe the Templar treasure found its final resting place on, or shall we say beneath, Oak Island. And while no final answer has come after the 200-year hunt on the island, many have died trying to bring up the treasure from far below, but having been hindered in their task by a long series of disastrous circumstances, including the death of 6 full-time treasure hunters. Asserts one researcher of long-standing, quote, once the unsuccessful colony of the Templars died out, instead of sailing back each time, they decided to hide the bounty. They built a complex money pit on Oak Island by engineering flood traps to prevent anyone reaching the treasure. The spot is marked using the form of a stone cross, a symbol typical of the Templar. End quote. And then, in this book, well, it goes on to talk about Oak Island, right? And I'm sure you have seen the program on the History Channel, The Curse of Oak Island. It's been around for quite a while now. Now look, did some of this stuff end up underneath Oak Island? Well, you'll have to read this book and you'll have to see what case is made. Here's one thing that I will tell you. I believe that a large portion of the Templar treasure ended up going to what we now call Switzerland. And I won't get into all the details of why I believe that. But we all know where do the richest people go to open their bank account, right? We all hear about the old Swiss bank account. How did Switzerland stay neutral and safe in the middle of the hellish chaos that was World War II raging all around them? And also, just so happens that in Switzerland we have a big, tall building called the Bank for International Settlements. So if you go to a bank in your community, in your neighborhood, and you get a loan, well, where do they get that from? Well, they get that loan from a bigger bank. And that bank got it from a bigger bank. And if you start following the trail, all these banks all lead up to one big bank. And it's called the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. And it has a public board and it's got a private board. And nobody knows who's on the private board. Those people might know a little something about the Knights Templar. If you get a chance, just jump on the internet when you're bored and just type in Bank for International Settlements in Basel. That's Basel, Basel, Switzerland. And read about it and see if you think that perhaps some of the treasure of the Knights Templar went there. So look, learning about the mysteries of the Knights Templar may or may not give you any insight into how gigantic economic and financial change occurs. But it certainly can't hurt. And I want you to think about this. In that day and age, when these guys were protecting such incredible wealth, you didn't have people running around with a driver's license, say, give me your ID to get into the bank and make a withdrawal. There was no fingerprinting. You didn't have your magnetic stripe on your special little card. How did they protect this stuff and make sure that only the proper people were able to get access to the things they deserved? Well, passwords, special types of handshakes or grips. A lot of this stuff ended up being included in Freemasonry because Masons knew how to build things. And what is a big safe? Well, it's a very specially constructed building, and you keep its exact construction a secret. They don't let you have the blueprint for the White House or Air Force One, right? You keep the construction of something like that a secret. And same goes for these safes that the Knights Templar would build. The Knights Templar may have been great at fighting, but that didn't mean that they knew how to build some kind of an elaborate, secure compartment for all these valuables. The Knights Templar teamed up with Masons in order to build these things, and from that became born a relationship that to this day exists in some form. Even if it's only a symbolic form, it still exists to this day. And that's why not only did they use these secret types of words and grips and whatnot, but also symbols, you see. So it serves the same purpose. So instead of me having a sign saying, "This way to the safe where all the gold is," you might have a very protected symbol that 99% of the people would walk right by and wouldn't even notice. But if you know what the deal is and you're looking for it and you've been educated, you will recognize that symbol. It becomes its own form of secret language. And because that Masons are very artistic people, you get some absolutely amazing artistry and a lot of thought put into how symbols function and how shapes work. And is a building that's shaped like a pyramid, is that a good structure just because it's physically sound, or is it also sound in another way in terms of how it channels energy, which could be something very realistic and practical. There may be sources of energy out there that mainstream physicists are not aware of. Then, of course, you have things like feng shui, which may be more of a subjective and yet sensory, atmospheric energy. All these things are taken into consideration. And that's why when I was making the golden ratio antenna pendant available, I thought, what a great match. For one thing, we're talking about gold, but furthermore, we're talking about sacred geometry. And the Knights Templar were great experts at understanding, through their relationship with Masonry, understanding the significance of sacred geometry and hidden symbols and how those symbols can direct people into particular places that are very, very rare and valuable. Okay. So, like I say, if you really want to dig into this book is 290 pages. And look, Tim is not paying me to promote this book. I'm just telling you, if you're interested in this sort of thing, why not check it out? Okay. Go to Amazon.com and just type in Hidden Treasures of the Knights Templar. I'll also put a link up for you. Hidden Treasures of the Knights Templar, Secrets of Rensselaer Chateau, Roslyn Chapel, Oak Island, and the Masonic Order. You can get it, it looks like, for as little as $15.92. Buy it brand new for $21.95. He prints books that are big, big size. Not just thick, but also just literally a big, easy to read books. Lots of great pictures and just really great material, good content. So anyway, hope you'll check that out. And sure enough, I'll put some links up. If you go to my Twitter page, that's just my name, Joshua P. Warren. At Joshua P. Warren, I'll have a link there and in some other places on my social media. So glad to be able to spend a whole podcast focusing on that a little bit more. Give you something to think about when you think about what real wealth is in terms of the financial system and how that has been handled and what may be happening to that money right now as we see a lot of it shifting from one place to another. Where is it going? Follow the money, so they say. And if you do that, you might be able to get a little more insight on what's happening, at very least, in your neck of the woods. Now, I have got a lot of great content coming up for you very soon. My next few podcasts are, they're going to be so interesting. Just stay tuned. I don't know, why wouldn't you, right? Go to my website, joshuapwarren.com. There's no period after the P. joshuapwarren.com. Be sure you sign up for the free e-newsletter there at the site. Speaking of money, I'm about to give one of my subscribers $100. I just do this randomly from time to time. Go. It takes you 2 seconds. Put your email address into the newsletter bank there, and it's not only a free newsletter, it's also spam free. Okay. So that's at joshuapwarren.com. Check out the links to all the cool stuff, amazing content. There's a lot there. Be sure to visit the Curiosity Shop, where you will find some things that I promise you will not find anywhere else in the world. And while you're on the website, please click the link to this podcast called Joshua P. Warren Daily. It's always short. It's always free, commercial free, uncensored, independent. You can subscribe through various means on various platforms. I hope you'll do that. Tell all your friends about this podcast. Share it with them. And you can also follow me on Twitter. I usually tweet when a new one is available, at Joshua P. Warren, at Joshua P. Warren. Okay, so that's it for this particular edition of the podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your interest and support. Thank you for staying curious. And I will talk to you again soon.